Zekthar sat in the small interview room on Epsilon Prime Station. His forearms trembled slightly as he reached for the water cup. The blue scales on his neck showed the pale marks that came from deep stress. The reporter across from him was an Nelthrin, one of the peaceful species that ran the galactic news networks. "Tell me about the humans," the reporter said softly. "Tell me what really happened at Kepler 440b." Zekthar closed his large yellow eyes for a moment. Even now, 3 years later, he could still hear the sounds, the explosions, the screams, the terrible quiet that came after. "Right. You have to understand." Zekthar began, his voice rough. "We were the best. The Korthani Empire had won every war for 300 years. We had conquered 47 worlds. Our ships were faster, our weapons stronger, our soldiers braver than anyone else in this part of the galaxy." The reporter nodded and made notes on his datapad. "When we first got reports about humans expanding into our territory, nobody was worried. Our intelligence officers laughed. They showed us pictures of these small pink creatures with only 2 arms and no natural weapons. No claws, no armor. Plating, no poison glands. They looked so weak."
Akhtar!
Paused and took another drink of water. His hands shook more now. The humans had claimed a planet called Kepler 440b. It was in a system we wanted for our mining operations. Standard procedure was simple. Send a fleet, demand surrender, take the planet. We had done it many times before. The reporter leaned forward. "But the humans were different." "We didn't know that yet," Zekthar said. Commander Velanash was in charge of our fleet. He was a war hero, winner of the Battle of Krexter, destroyer of the vegan resistance. He looked at the human settlement and saw 50,000 civilians with basic technology. No orbital defenses, no military stations, just farms and small cities. Zekthar's voice got quieter. Velanash called it a vacation mission. Said we would be home in time for the festival season. He brought 200 ships and 50,000 Marines. For 50,000 humans, we thought it was too much force. The reporter made more notes. "What was your first contact with the humans like?" "Standard protocol. We sent them a message giving them 72 hours to surrender or evacuate. Most species just leave when they see our fleet. Some try to negotiate. Few fight back with whatever weapons they have, but they give up quickly when they see how outmatched they are." Zekthar stood up and walked to the small window. Outside, he could see ships from dozens of different species docked at the station. Peaceful traders, explorers, diplomats. None of them were human ships. The humans sent back a message. It was from their leader, a female named Lisa Martinez. She thanked us for the warning. She said they appreciated the time to prepare. Then she said something that confused us all. "What did she say?" "She said they were sorry for what was about to happen. To us. She said they hoped our families would understand that we gave them no choice." Commander Velanash thought it was a translation error. How could these weak creatures be sorry for us? Zekthar returned to his chair. His expression was haunted.
During
those 72 hours, our scouts watched what the humans did. They didn't run. They didn't try to hide. Instead, they started digging. They dug trenches, tunnels, underground chambers. They took apart their own buildings and moved to pieces, emptied their schools and hospitals and filled them with things our scouts couldn't identify. The reporter looked puzzled. Digging? That's their defense strategy? Thought they were being stupid, digging holes to hide in. Our weapons could blast through rock, so we figured they were just making their own graves. Velanash ordered the fleet to move into attack position. He wanted to end this quickly and get the embarrassment over with. Zekthar's voice became very quiet. The humans kept working right up until the deadline. Our sensors showed them moving equipment, setting up positions, organizing their people. But it didn't look like any military formation we recognized. They had children helping carry supplies, old people directing construction, scientists working alongside farmers. Did this concern your commanders? Some of the younger officers asked questions. They wondered why the humans seemed so calm, why they weren't panicking or trying to escape. Lieutenant Kexmal suggested that maybe humans had different psychology than other species we had fought. Maybe they didn't understand how hopeless their situation was. Zekthar laughed, but there was no humor in it. Commander Velanash said that fear was the same in every species. He said once the shooting started, the humans would break just like everyone else. He ordered the first wave of landing craft to launch. The The reporter waited patiently as Zekthar collected his thoughts. I was in the first wave. 500 of our best troops in 20 landing craft. Our plan was simple. Land near the main city, set up a perimeter, demand surrender. If they refused, we would start destroying buildings until they gave up. Standard procedure that had worked on dozens of worlds. Zekthar's scales turned darker as he remembered. We approached the landing zone. Everything looked normal. The humans had built what looked like defensive positions, but they were simple earthworks and metal barriers. Nothing that could stop our weapons. Our pilots were joking about how easy this would be. Then we landed. The reporter waited. The first thing that went wrong was the landing zone itself. The humans had dug it up and refilled it, but not with dirt. They had mixed in chemicals that turned into poison gas when our engines heated the ground. Half of our landing craft were filled with toxic smoke before we could even get out. Zekthar's 4 hands clenched into fists, but that was just the beginning. As our troops ran from the landing craft, the ground exploded. Not from bombs or missiles. The humans had turned their farming equipment into mines. Machines that were meant to plant seeds were now set to explode when we stepped on them. Our soldiers were trained for this kind of trap. They spread out, moved carefully, used their sensors to find more mines. But the humans had done something we had never seen before. They had made the mines smart. The explosives were connected to computers that waited until we were in groups before they went off. The reporter's writing became faster. How many casualties? 50? Soldiers dead in the first 10 minutes. But we were still confident. 50,000 troops could absorb those losses. We called for medical support and continued the advance. Zekthar stood up again and began pacing. That's when we saw the humans for the first time. They weren't hiding in bunkers or behind walls. Like normal defenders, they were everywhere. In trees, underground, inside buildings that looked empty. No, they were doing things that made no sense. What kind of things? They were using their children's toys as weapons. Little robots that were meant to play games had been turned into mobile bombs. They would roll up to our soldiers looking harmless, then explode. Our troops didn't know whether to shoot at everything that moved or ignore what looked like innocent objects. Zekthar's voice became strained. But the worst part was how they fought. Every other species we had conquered fought to win battles. The humans fought to make us suffer. They didn't just want to stop us. They wanted to make us afraid. The reporter looked up from his notes. Afraid of what? Afraid of everything. Afraid to touch anything. Afraid to enter any building. Afraid to trust our own equipment. In 6 hours, they had turned their entire settlement into a place where every step could be our last. Every decision could be wrong, and every moment could bring some new horror we had never imagined. Zekthar sat down heavily. By the end of the first day, all 500 of us were dead, all except me. And I only survived because a human medic found me buried under rubble and decided to keep me alive. The reporter stared at him. A human medic saved you. That, Zekthar said, was when I realized we weren't fighting soldiers. We were fighting something much worse. We were fighting an entire species that had made war into an art form. The reporter poured more water for Zekthar, who was now visibly shaking. The alien's forearms wrapped around his body, as if trying to hold himself together. The human medic who saved you, the reporter said gently, "Tell me about that." Zekthar nodded slowly. Her name was Dr. Karen White. She was small, even for a human, maybe half my size. She found me trapped under concrete and metal beams. My legs were crushed. My breathing unit was damaged. I should have died there. He paused, looking out the window again. I expected her to kill me. That's what we would have done. That's what any sensible species would do to an enemy soldier. Instead, she gave me medicine for the pain and started digging me out. While she worked, she talked to me. Her voice was calm, like she was having a normal conversation. She told me her name, asked about my injuries, explained what she was doing. To help me, I couldn't understand why she was being kind to someone who had come to destroy her home. The reporter made notes. What did you learn from her? Everything, Zekthar said. Dr. White told me that the humans had been preparing for our attack for months. They knew we were coming long before we sent our surrender demand. They had studied our previous battles, learned our tactics, analyzed our weaknesses. Zekthar's voice grew stronger as he continued. She said the humans had turned their entire settlement into what they called a learning laboratory. Every trap, every weapon, every defensive position was designed to teach them something new about how we fought. They weren't just trying to survive our attack. They were trying to understand us. But why? Because humans don't just fight one battle at a time. They fight every battle they might ever face. Dr. White explained that humans assume every enemy will learn from their mistakes and get stronger. So humans have to learn faster and get stronger too. Zekthar stood up and began pacing again. While she worked on my injuries, I could hear the sounds of battle continuing above us. Explosions, weapons, fire, our soldiers shouting orders. But there were other sounds too, sounds I didn't recognize. What kind of sounds? Machinery? Lots of machinery. Dr. White told me that humans were building new weapons during the battle, not just using what they had prepared, but actually creating new things as they fought. She said they had engineers working in underground workshops, turning wreckage from our landing craft into tools and weapons. The reporter looked surprised. They were making weapons from your own equipment? Better than that, they were improving it? Dr. White showed me a device that looked like one of our communication units, but the humans had changed it. They had figured out how to use it to jam our sensors and confuse our targeting systems. In just a few hours, they had taken our technology and made it work better than we could. Zekthar sat down heavily. That's when I realized something terrible. We had been fighting for 300 years, but we had been fighting the same way every time. We used the same tactics, the same weapons, the same strategies. We won because we were stronger and had better technology. But we never learned anything. New? The humans were different? Completely different. Every human seemed to know something about engineering, about chemistry, about biology, about physics. Dr. White was a medical doctor. She understood how our weapons worked, knew about our body chemistry, our psychological responses, our military protocols. She had learned all of this in just the few months since they detected our fleet. Zekthar's voice became quieter. While she bandaged my wounds, she told me about the human leader, Captain Jake Morrison. He wasn't a career soldier like our commanders. He'd been a construction worker before the war started, but in 3 months, he had learned everything. Our military schools taught in 3 years. How's that possible? Because humans share knowledge differently than we do. In our military, information flows down from commanders to soldiers. Orders go down, reports go up. But humans talk too, each other constantly. They share ideas, ask questions, suggest improvements. Every human soldier was also a teacher and a student. Zekthar stopped pacing and looked directly at the reporter. Dr. White told me that Captain Morrison had asked every human in the settlement to contribute ideas for the defense. Farmers suggested ways to use agricultural chemicals as weapons. Teachers found ways to turn educational materials into communication networks. Children came up with hiding spots that adults couldn't think of. Even the children were involved in the war, not as soldiers. The humans were very careful about that. But they used their children's creativity. Human children think differently. Than adults, they see possibilities that grown-ups miss. The humans turned this into a weapon, the reporter wrote quickly. What kind of weapon? Imagination. The humans had asked their children to play a game called What If? What if toys could fight? What if playgrounds were fortresses? What if school supplies were tools for survival? Then the adults took these ideas and made them real. Zekathar's scales darkened again. I learned this when the battle moved to the school district. Our second wave of troops had landed and was advancing through the residential areas. They came to a group of buildings that looked like educational facilities. Empty buildings, no defenders visible, no weapons detected. It was a trap. It was a nightmare. The humans had turned the entire school complex into a maze of death. But not with normal military traps. They had used things that children would understand. Doorways that led to fake rooms. Hallways that were actually slides into underground chambers. Playground equipment that had been turned into catapults and crossbows. Zekthar's voice became very quiet. Our soldiers were trained to fight enemy soldiers. They were not trained to fight an entire environment that had been designed by people who understood how children think. Every room was a puzzle, every corridor was a game, and every game was deadly. How many casualties? The entire second wave. 800 soldiers. They died in a school that had been turned into a funhouse of horror. And the worst part was that I could hear the humans talking to each other during the battle. They were analyzing our tactics, discussing our weaknesses, planning improvements for next time. The reporter looked up from his notes. Next time? That's what terrified me most. The humans weren't just fighting to win this battle. They were fighting to learn how to win the next battle, and the battle after that, and every battle they might face in the future. Every trap that worked, they made notes about. Every trap that failed, they redesigned. Zekthar sat down and put his head in his hands. Dr. White explained that humans call this adaptive learning. They assume that every enemy will study their defeats and come back stronger. So humans have to evolve faster than their enemies can adapt. But your people are experienced warriors. Experience was our weakness. We had so much success that we stopped learning. We thought our way was the only way. The humans showed us that there are always new ways to fight, new ways to think, new ways to turn ordinary things into weapons. Zekthar looked up at the reporter. Dr. White finished treating my injuries and then did something that still confuses me. She gave me a communication device and told me to call for medical evacuation. She said she didn't want me to die because dead enemies can't learn from their mistakes. She'll let you contact your fleet? Yes, and while I was calling for help, she was studying my communication equipment. By the time the rescue ship arrived, she had figured out how to hack into our command frequencies. The humans were listening to our battle plans before we could execute them. The reporter stared at Zekthar. How did your commanders respond? Didn't understand what was happening. Commander Velanosh kept sending more troops, using the same tactics, following the same procedures. He thought the humans were just lucky, or that our soldiers were being careless. He couldn't accept that. We were being outthought by what he called primitive savages. Zekthar's voice became bitter. That's when Captain Morrison sent us a message. It wasn't a threat or a demand for surrender. It was a lesson plan. He explained exactly how the humans were defeating us, step by step, like he was teaching a class. He offered to show us better ways to fight if we were interested in learning. What was your commander's response? Velanosh was furious. He ordered a full orbital bombardment of the human settlement. He said he would show these creatures what real warfare looked like. He was going to kill every human on the planet and be done with this embarrassment. Zekthar stood up and walked to the window again. That's when we learned that the humans had been preparing for orbital bombardment too. And they had some very creative ideas about how to fight back. The reporter noticed that Zekthar's breathing had become faster. The alien's forehands were clenched so tightly that his knuckles had turned white. The orbital bombardment, the reporter said softly. That's when things got worse. Zekthar nodded without looking away from the window. Commander Velanosh was done playing games. He had lost over 1,000 soldiers to these humans, and his pride was hurt. He ordered all 200 ships to target the human settlement with our most powerful weapons. Standard procedure for orbital bombardment is simple. You position your ships in high orbit, lock onto major population centers, and fire until nothing moves. We had destroyed entire cities this way. Whole civilizations had surrendered just from the threat of bombardment. The reporter made notes. But the humans had prepared for this too? We didn't think that was possible. How do you prepare for attacks from space when you have no space fleet? How do you fight ships that are thousands of kilometers above you? Humans had no orbital defenses, no anti-ship weapons, no way to reach us. Ikthar turned back to face the reporter. That's what we thought. Commander Velanosh gave the order to begin bombardment. Every ship in the fleet opened fire at the same time. Enough energy to crack a moon, all focused on one small human settlement. What happened? Nothing. The weapons fired correctly. The energy beams hit their targets. But the explosions were wrong. Instead of destroying buildings and killing humans, our weapons seemed to just disappear into the ground. Zekthar sat down heavily. At first we thought there was a technical problem. Our weapons officers ran diagnostics, checked their systems, recalibrated their targeting. Everything was working perfectly, but our attacks were having no effect. The humans had shields, now something much more clever. They had spent those 3 months studying our previous battles. They learned exactly how our orbital weapons worked, what kind of energy they used, how much heat they generated. Then they built something we had never seen before. The reporter leaned forward. What kind of something? They had turned their entire settlement into a giant energy absorber. Every building, every street, every piece of metal had been connected to a network of underground systems. When our weapons hit, instead of exploding, the energy was captured and redirected. Zekthar's voice became quiet with amazement. The humans were using our own weapons to power their defenses. Every shot we fired made them stronger. Dr. Karen White later explained it to me. She said humans had learned to never waste anything, especially the energy that enemies gave them for free. Surely your commander didn't give up? Velanash was furious. He ordered continuous bombardment. All day, all night, our ships poured energy into that planet. We used up half our ammunition reserves. The weapons officers were getting worried about overheating their systems. Zekthar stood up and began pacing again. Then the humans sent us another message. This time it was from an engineer named Amy Chen. She thanked us for the free energy. She said the humans had been having trouble powering some of their new projects, but our bombardment had solved that problem. New projects, she showed us. The humans had been building things underground while we were shooting at them. Factories, workshops, laboratories. They were using the energy from our weapons to manufacture equipment, process materials, and run experiments. The reporter stared at Zekthar. They were using your attack to build weapons? Worse, they were using our attack to build better versions of our own weapons. Amy Chen had reverse-engineered our energy cannons from studying the bombardment. She had built human versions that were more efficient, more accurate, and more powerful than ours. Zekthar's scales turned darker. That's when we realized we weren't fighting a defense. We were fighting a factory. Every attack we made gave the humans more resources to work with. Every weapon we used became a blueprint for them to improve on. How did your commander respond to this? The worst decision possible. Velanash ordered ground assault while continuing the bombardment. He said that if energy weapons weren't working, we would land more troops and fight the humans. Face to face. Zekthar sat down and put his head in his hands. 20,000 Marines in the third wave. Our best soldiers, our most experienced officers, our newest equipment. They landed in the middle of a human settlement that had been absorbing weapon energy for 3 days straight. What did they find? Hell. The humans had used our bombardment energy to change everything. Buildings that had been simple homes were now armored fortresses. Streets that had been normal roads were now filled with defensive systems. Even the air was different. The reporter looked confused. The air? The humans had used some of our energy to power atmospheric processors. They had changed the gas mixture in their settlement to something that was poisonous to us, but harmless to them. Our soldiers needed breathing equipment just to survive outside their vehicles. Zekthar is. The voice became strained. But that was just the beginning. The humans had also used our energy to power manufacturing systems. They had built thousands of small robots, each one designed to fight Korthani soldiers. Combat robots? Not like any robots we had ever seen. These were smart, fast, and creative. They used tools and weapons in ways we couldn't predict. Some of them looked like human children's toys but could cut through our armor. Others looked like maintenance equipment but could hack into our communication systems. Zekthar stood up and walked to the window again. The worst part was that the robots were learning. Every time our soldiers destroyed one, the others would analyze what happened and adapt. They shared information instantly, so a lesson learned by one robot was immediately known by all of them. Your soldiers were fighting an enemy that evolved. During the battle? Exactly. And the humans were controlling everything from underground bunkers that our sensors couldn't detect. They had built a command network that used our own bombardment energy as a power source. The more we attacked, the better their communications became, the reporter wrote quickly. How long did the ground battle last? 6 hours? 20,000 of our best soldiers, dead in 6 hours? And this time, we didn't even recover a single survivor. The humans had learned from my rescue that wounded enemies could provide intelligence. Zekthar's voice became very quiet. What? They didn't just kill our soldiers, captured our equipment, our vehicles, our weapons. Everything we brought to the battle became part of their arsenal. Amy Chen sent us another message showing human soldiers using improved versions of our own gear. Improved how? Faster, stronger, more reliable. The humans had fixed design flaws that our own engineers had never noticed. It made our weapons better than we could make them ourselves. It was like watching our children surpass us in everything we thought we were good at. The reporter looked up from his notes. What was Commander Velenash's reaction? He was broken. 3 days of fighting, and we had lost over 20,000 soldiers while killing maybe 300 humans. Our weapons had been turned against us. Our tactics had been studied and countered. Our technology had been improved by the enemy. Zekthar sat down again. That's when the humans made their most terrifying move. Dr. Ben Clark, a scientist, contacted our fleet directly. He didn't threaten us or demand surrender. Instead, he offered to teach us. Teach you what? How to fight better? Said the humans had learned so much about Korthani military systems that they could help us improve our effectiveness. He offered to share their research, their improvements, their innovations. All we had to do was stop attacking and start learning. The reporter stared. What did your commander say? Velanash screamed that he would never learn from inferior creatures. He said he would show these humans what real military power looked like. He ordered the deployment of our experimental weapons, the ones we had never used in battle before. Zekthar's expression became haunted. That's when we learned that the humans had been waiting for us to escalate. They had been studying our fleet composition, analyzing our ship designs, calculating our maximum possible firepower. They knew exactly what weapons we had left to use, and they were ready. They were more than ready. They had been preparing surprises of their own, things that would make everything we had seen so far look simple by comparison. Zekthar looked directly at the reporter. The humans were about to show us what they could do when they stopped trying to be defensive and started trying to be creative. Zekthar's whole body was shaking now. The reporter had to lean forward to hear his voice, which had become barely above a whisper. The experimental weapons, the reporter prompted gently. Commander Velanash ordered the use of our molecular disruptors. These were weapons that could break apart matter at the atomic level. They had never been used in actual combat because they were too powerful, too dangerous. It could destroy entire continents if used incorrectly. Zekthar closed his eyes. Velanash didn't care anymore. He wanted to wipe the human settlement off the planet completely. He said that if we couldn't conquer them, we would make sure no one else could learn from them. The weapons were fired. Yes, 3 ships used their molecular disruptors on the human settlement. The energy release was enormous. Space itself seemed to bend around the impact zone. We should have vaporized everything within 50 kilometers. The reporter waited patiently as Zekthar struggled to continue, but nothing happened. The weapons fired, the energy hit the planet, and then it just disappeared. No explosion, no destruction, no effects at all. Our sensors showed that the disruptor beams had simply vanished into the ground. The humans had absorbed that too? Something much worse? Dr. Ben Clark contacted us immediately after the attack. He thanked us for the demonstration of molecular disruption technology. He said the humans had been trying to understand how to manipulate matter at the atomic level, but they hadn't had enough energy to run proper experiments. Zekthar opened his eyes and looked directly at the reporter. He said our weapons had given them exactly what they needed to complete their research. Then he showed us what they had built with it. What had they built? They had turned the entire planet into a weapon, not just the settlement, the entire planet. They had used our molecular disruptors to create a network of disruption fields that covered the whole world. They could control matter anywhere on the surface. The reporter's writing stopped. Control matter how? They could make our ships stop working. While we watched, they demonstrated by targeting one of our scout vessels. From the planet's surface, they reached out and simply turned off the molecular bonds holding the ship together. It fell apart like a puzzle with all the pieces coming. Zekthar stood up and began pacing frantically. But they didn't kill the crew. They used the same technology to create a safe landing zone for the escape pods. Dr. Clark explained that they wanted us to see what they could do. It's not just kill us randomly. This was a demonstration, a lesson the humans were still trying to teach us. Clark said that humans preferred not to kill unless they had no other choice. He said they would rather show us how outmatched we were and give us a chance to leave peacefully. The reporter made notes quickly. How did your fleet respond? Panic. Complete panic. Our captains realized that if the humans could take apart one ship, they could take apart all of them. Some officers wanted to retreat immediately. Others wanted to attack with everything we had before the humans could target more vessels. Zekthar's voice became bitter. Commander Velanash chose the worst possible option. He decided to ram the planet with our largest ship, the Destroyer of Worlds. He said that if we were going to die, we would take the humans with us. A suicide attack? Yes, the Destroyer of Worlds was a battle cruiser with enough mass to crack a planet's crust. If it hit at full speed. Velanash ordered the crew to evacuate, then set the ship on a collision course. It was going to kill every human on the planet, even if it meant destroying one of our most valuable vessels. The reporter looked horrified. Did the humans try to? Stop it. They did something much more terrifying. They let it come. Our sensors showed the massive ship falling toward the planet like a giant meteor. The humans made no attempt to shoot it down or divert its course. They just watched it fall. Zekthar sat down heavily. Then when the ship was about to hit the surface, the humans used their matter control technology. But they didn't destroy the ship or push it away. Instead, they caught it. They stopped it in midair, about a kilometer above their main city. The Destroyer of Worlds. All 50,000 tons of it, just hanging in the sky like it was resting on an invisible table. Then Amy Chen contacted us again. Zekthar's voice became very quiet. She thanked Velanash for the gift. She said that humans had been looking for more raw materials to build their projects. An entire battlecruiser would give them everything they needed. They were going to salvage it. While we watched, they began taking the ship apart. Not with tools or machines, but with the same matter control technology. They dismantled our most powerful warship piece by piece, sorting the materials and transporting them to underground facilities. The reporter stared at Zekthar. How long did this take? Hours? In 2 hours, they had completely disassembled the Destroyer of Worlds and organized all the components for reuse. But that wasn't the worst part. What was worse? They improved. While they took it apart, the humans studied every system, every component, every design feature. They found ways to make everything work better, and they began building new things with the improved materials. Thar's hands were shaking again. Amy Chen showed us what they were building. Human ships, but not copies of our designs. These were completely new concepts that used our technology in ways we had never imagined. Better ships. Ships that made ours look like toys. Faster, stronger, more efficient, more intelligent. The humans had taken everything we knew about space, travel and engineering, then added their own ideas to create something completely new. The reporter wrote frantically. How many ships were they building? That's when we realized the true horror of our situation. The humans hadn't just been defending their settlement. They'd been using our attack as a construction project. Every weapon we fired, every ship we sent, every piece of technology we brought to the battle had become part of their manufacturing process. Zekthar stood up and walked to the window again. Dr. Clark contacted us one more time. He said the humans had finished their analysis of Korthani military capabilities. He thanked us for providing such detailed examples of our technology and tactics. Then he made an offer. Said the humans were ready to end the battle. They could destroy our entire fleet easily, but they preferred not to. Instead, they offered to let us leave peacefully with one condition. What condition? We had to take a message back to the Korthani Empire. A message that would be delivered to every species in our part of the galaxy. A message that would explain exactly what had happened here and what it meant for the future. The reporter looked up from his notes. What was the message? That humans were different from every other species we had ever encountered. That they didn't fight just to win battles, but to learn from every conflict. That they could take any attack and turn it into a lesson, any weapon and turn it into a tool, an enemy and turn them into a teacher. Zekthar's voice became very quiet. The message said that humans didn't want to conquer the galaxy. They didn't want to destroy other species or take their territory. They just wanted to be left alone to explore and learn and grow. Message also said that if any species chose to attack humanity, they should be prepared for consequences. Not revenge or punishment, but education. The humans would use every attack as an opportunity to learn something new, to build something better, to become something more. The reporter stopped writing. Did your commander accept the offer? Commander Velanash was completely broken by then. He had lost most of his fleet, seen his most powerful weapons turned against him, watched his greatest ship become raw materials for human construction projects. He accepted the offer without even trying to negotiate. Zekthar turned back to face the reporter. The humans weren't finished with their lessons. As our surviving ships prepared to leave, they demonstrated one final capability. What was that? It showed us what they had built with all the materials from our attacks. The new human ships that had been constructed from our own technology. Ships that were faster and more powerful than anything in our fleet. Expression became haunted. But they didn't use these ships to attack us. Instead, they used them to escort our damaged vessels safely out of the system. They provided medical supplies for our wounded, repair materials for our broken ships, and navigation assistance for our journey home. The humans helped you leave. Dr. Karen White contacted me personally before we departed. She said that humans preferred to make friends rather than enemies. She said they hoped that someday, when the Korthoni were ready to learn instead of fight, we could work together on projects that would benefit both species. Zekthar sat down heavily. That's when I understood the most terrifying thing about humans. They had completely defeated us, captured our technology, destroyed our pride, and demonstrated their superiority in every possible way. And they were still trying to be kind to us. The reporter stared at him. That frightened you? More than anything else? Species that could be that powerful and that merciful at the same time was beyond our understanding. We knew how to fight enemies and how to surrender to conquerors. But we had no idea how to respond to people who could destroy us completely and chose not to. The reporter set down his datapad and looked at Zekthar with something close to fear in his eyes. What happened when you returned to Korthoni space? Zekthar was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was hollow. The Empire didn't believe us at first. How could they? We came back with stories about humans who could control matter with their minds, who could build weapons from enemy attacks, who could defeat our greatest fleet, and then help the survivors go home safely. The High Command thought we were suffering from battle shock. They thought the trauma of losing so badly had broken our minds. Commander Velenash was removed from duty and sent for psychological treatment. The other surviving officers were questioned for days. The reporter picked up his pad again. When did they start to believe you? When the human message arrived. 3 days after our return, every communication system in the Korthoni Empire received the same transmission at exactly the same time. Not through our normal channels, but directly into our equipment. The humans had somehow hacked into our entire communication network from hundreds of light years away. Zekthar is 4. Hands clenched together. The message was from Colonel Maria Santos, the final human commander. She introduced herself politely and thanked the Korthoni Empire for the educational opportunity. She said the battle had taught humans valuable lessons about space warfare and alien psychology. What kind of lessons? Everything. Colonel Santos explained that humans had analyzed every aspect of our attack. Our ship designs, our weapons technology, our tactical thinking, our command structure, psychological responses to stress. She said they now understood exactly how the Korthoni Empire functioned as a military force. The reporter wrote quickly. Did she threaten you? That's what made it so terrifying. She didn't threaten us at all. Instead, she offered to help us. Colonel Santos said that humans had identified several weaknesses in Korthoni military doctrine that made us vulnerable to other enemies. She offered to share their analysis and suggest improvements. Zekthar stood up and began pacing again. She attached detailed reports showing how the humans could have destroyed our fleet in the first hour of battle if they had wanted to. She showed us exactly where our defenses had failed, which of our tactics were predictable, and how our technology could be defeated by any enemy who understood the principles. The humans were giving you military intelligence about your own weaknesses? More than that, were teaching us how to be better soldiers. Colonel Santos explained that humans believed in something called mutual improvement. She said that if all species became stronger and smarter, everyone would benefit from the increased knowledge and capability. The reporter looked confused. But why would they want to make their potential enemies stronger? Because humans don't think about other species as enemies. They think about them as potential friends who just haven't learned to cooperate yet. Colonel Santos said that humans would rather live in a galaxy full of intelligent, capable species than a galaxy full of weak ones who might need to be conquered for their own protection. Zekthar sat down heavily. The message ended with an invitation. Colonel Santos said that if any Corthona scientists or engineers wanted to visit human space for educational exchanges, they would be welcome. She said humans would be happy to share their technology and knowledge in return for learning about Corthony culture and science. How did your government respond? Complete panic. The High Command realized that if humans could hack into our communication systems from across the galaxy, they could probably do much worse things if they wanted to. Emergency sessions were called. Military advisors argued for hours about how to respond. Zekthar's voice became bitter. Some officials wanted to attack immediately, before the humans could become even more dangerous. Others wanted to surrender and beg for mercy. A few suggested accepting the invitation and trying to learn from the humans. What decision was made? The worst possible one. The High Command decided to do nothing. They classified all information about the battle, forbade anyone from talking about it, and pretended that humans didn't exist. They hoped that if they ignored the problem, it would go away. The reporter stared at Zekthar. But you're talking about it now, because ignoring humans doesn't make them disappear. Over the next 3 years, we learned that humans had contacted every major species in our part of the galaxy. The same message, the same offer of cooperation, the same demonstration of their ability to reach anyone they wanted to reach. Zekathar's expression became haunted. The species began to respond. The Vegan Confederacy sent a small diplomatic mission to human space. It came back with technological advances that made their society twice as efficient. The Centauri Republic started a cultural exchange program. The Tau Ceti Union began joint research projects with human scientists. Everyone was cooperating with humans, not everyone. Some species, like the Corthoni Empire, tried to maintain isolation. But it became harder and harder to ignore what was happening. Every species that worked with humans became stronger, smarter, more advanced. They developed better technology, better medicine, better social systems. The reporter made notes. What about species that remained hostile to humans? That's when we learned the most terrifying thing about human warfare. The Rigel hegemony decided to test human defenses. They thought that if they attacked quickly and decisively, they could defeat humans before any other species could intervene. Zekthar's voice became very quiet. The war lasted 6 hours. The entire hegemony fleet was captured intact with no human casualties. But the humans didn't destroy the hegemony government or occupy their territory. Instead, they used the captured ships to deliver medical supplies and educational materials to hegemony worlds. They helped their attackers. The humans treated the attack as a cry for help. They analyzed hegemony society and discovered that the aggression was caused by resource shortages and social instability. So they provided resources and shared social technologies that solved the underlying problems. The reporter looked amazed. What was the result? Within a year, the Rigel hegemony had become one of humanity's closest allies. They began teaching other species about the benefits of human cooperation. The hegemony became living proof that attacking humans was not only futile, but counterproductive. Zekthar walked to the window again. That's when I realized what humans were really doing. They weren't building an empire or conquering the galaxy, they were converting it. Every interaction with humans made other species more like them. More cooperative, more innovative, more willing to share knowledge and resources. Is that a bad thing? That depends on your perspective. If you believe that strength comes from competition and dominance, then humans are the ultimate threat. Make traditional warfare obsolete by being too good at it and too generous in victory. Zekthar turned back to the reporter. But if you believe that strength comes from cooperation and learning, then humans are the greatest opportunity the galaxy has ever seen. They offer partnership instead of conquest, education instead of exploitation, growth instead of stagnation. Do you believe? I believe that humans have changed everything. The old ways of thinking about war, politics, and species relationships don't work anymore. Humans have shown that there's a better way to be intelligent life in the universe. The reporter wrote for several minutes. What happened to you after you returned home? I was classified as a security risk because I believed the human message. I was discharged from military service and forbidden from discussing my experiences. But I couldn't forget what I had learned. I couldn't ignore the fact that humans had saved my life when they could have let me die. Zekthar's voice became stronger. So I left Corthoni's space and came here, to Epsilon Prime. This is a neutral station where species can meet freely. I requested this interview because I think people need to know the truth about humans. What truth is that? That humans are not like any other species we have encountered. They fight wars by making them unnecessary. They win battles by teaching their enemies better ways to live. They conquer territory by making everyone want to be their friends. The reporter looked up from his notes. Do you think humans will eventually control the galaxy? They already do, in a way. Not through force or politics, but through influence. Every species that has contact with humans becomes more human-like in their thinking, more cooperative, more innovative, more willing to solve problems, through learning rather than fighting. Zekthar sat down for the final time. But humans don't seem to want control in the traditional sense. They want partnership. They want to build a galaxy where all species work together to explore, learn, and grow. Right? They want to turn the universe into a classroom instead of a battlefield. And you support this vision? I've seen what humans can do when they fight. I've also seen what they can do when they help. Given the choice between being their enemy or their student, I choose to be their student. The reporter closed his datapad. Any final thoughts for our viewers? Zekthar looked directly into the recording device. To any species considering conflict with humanity, don't. Not because you might lose, but because you might win. And if you win against humans, you lose the chance to learn from them.